19, 1941. 24,000 feet above the English Channel, a Spitfire banks hard, pursuing a Messerschmitt Bf 109. The British pilot, a legless RAF officer flying on artificial limbs, closes in for the kill. Then another 109 drops from above. Cannon fire rips through the Spitfire's engine. Flames erupt. The cockpit fills with smoke. The legless pilot fights to escape, but his artificial legs are trapped in the cockpit. He's burning alive at 400 miles per hour. The German pilot who shot him down circles, watching the Spitfire spiral toward the channel. He expects to see a corpse. Instead, 18 years later, he'll shake hands with the man he tried to kill, and they'll become the closest of friends. But first, both men would have to survive the war, and one would spend years in a Soviet prison, forgotten by the world. Douglas Robert Stewart Bader was born February 21, 1910 in St. John's Wood, London. His father, a civil engineer, died when Douglas was young. Raised by relatives, Bader attended St. Edward's School in Oxford, where he excelled in sports: rugby, cricket, boxing. He was competitive, aggressive, fearless to the point of recklessness. In 1928, he entered the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell. He graduated in 1930 and was commissioned as a pilot officer. Bader was a natural pilot, gifted, cocky, and dangerous. In December 1931, while performing unauthorized aerobatics at low altitude, Bader crashed. His right leg was amputated above the knee, his left leg below the knee. He was 21 years old. Doctors said he'd never walk again, let alone fly. Bader proved them wrong. Within months, he was walking on artificial legs, tin legs, he called them. He learned to drive, play golf, even dance. But the RAF medically discharged him, no legless pilots allowed. For 8 years, Bader worked as a petroleum executive at the Asiatic Petroleum Company. He married Thela Edwards in 1933. When war broke out in September 1939, Bader demanded reinstatement. The RAF refused. He persisted, calling in favors, writing letters, showing up at airfields. Finally, in November 1939, the RAF relented. Bader was cleared to fly. By February 1940, he was back in a cockpit, a Hurricane fighter. He flew combat missions during the Battle of France and the Battle of Britain. He became an ace, shooting down over 20 German aircraft. He was promoted to squadron leader, then wing commander. He led fighter wings over occupied France in 1941. He was a legend, the legless pilot who defied death daily.
Bader led a
On
fighter
August 9,
sweep over northern France
1941,
near Le Touquet.
Bader was leading a
His
fighter
formation
sweep over
encountered
northern
German
France
fighters
when he
from
collided with another
JG-26,
aircraft. His
commanded by
Spitfire
Adolf
broke apart.
Galland.
Bader
What
bailed
exactly
out, leaving
happened
one
during that
artificial
dogfight
leg
remains
trapped in the
debated.
wreckage.
German
He was
records
captured
credit
by
Galland's
German
pilots
forces
with
and spent the
shooting
rest
down
of the
Bader.
war in POW
British
camps,
witnesses
including
reported a mid-air
Colditz
collision
Castle.
between Bader's
Wilhelm
Spitfire and a
Maximo
Bf
Motovica
109.
was born March 8,
certain,
1914
Bader's
in
Spitfire
Munich,
broke apart.
Bavaria.
The tail
His father
section
was a
separated.
shopkeeper, his
Bader,
mother a
trapped in the
seamstress.
cockpit, struggled
Maximo
to escape as the
Motovica
aircraft
grew up in the
tumbled toward her.
chaos of post-World
He
War I
finally broke
Germany,
free, but his right
hyperinflation,
prosthetic
political
leg,
violence,
attached to the
desperation.
rudder pedal, tore
In
away.
1933, when
He
the Nazis
descended
came
under
to power,
parachute with
Maximo
only his left
Motovica was
artificial leg.
19 and unemployed.
Bader landed
Like many
near
young
Saint
Germans,
Domingue.
he saw the party
German
as Germany's
soldiers found him
salvation.
lying in a
He
field,
joined the Hitler Youth, then the
remarkably
Luftwaffe
calm
in
given the
1935.
circumstances.
He trained
They
as a
took him
fighter
to Saint
pilot
Domingue
and proved
Hospital, where
exceptionally
doctors
skilled.
examined him.
By
The
1939,
hospital staff
he was
was
flying
astonished
Messerschmitt
to discover he
Bf
had artificial
109s.
legs and was
Maximo
missing one.
Motovica flew combat
Word spread
missions over
quickly through
Poland,
German
France,
military
and Britain.
channels.
He shot
Adolf
down 12
Galland, whose
aircraft during the
headquarters was
Battle
at
of Britain.
Saint-Domingue
He was
airfield,
awarded the
learned
Iron
that the
Cross
famous
First
British
Class.
legless pilot
By
had been
1941, he was stationed
Galland
with
went to
Jag de
meet him.
Geschwander 26 in
Their first
occupied
encounter
France,
set the tone
flying
for
daily
everything that
patrols
followed.
against RAF
Galland
incursions.
entered the
He
hospital
was
room
27
expecting a
years old,
dejected,
an
defeated
experienced
enemy.
combat pilot with over
Instead, he
300
found
missions
Bader sitting
flown.
up, smoking,
Maximo Motovica
demanding to
kept
know
a
when
private
he could have
diary
his
throughout the
missing leg
war.
back so he could
In it,
attempt
he
to
recorded
escape.
his growing
Galland was
disillusionment with the
impressed.
Nazi regime.
Here was a warrior,
In June
a professional
1941,
who
he
refused
wrote,
to accept
"We were
defeat
told we
even as
fight for Germany's survival, but I see only destruction. I see cities burning. I see refugees fleeing. What are we building? What future do we create with all this death?" He'd witnessed atrocities in Poland, SS units executing civilians, towns burned, Jews herded into ghettos. He'd seen the Luftwaffe bomb British cities, killing thousands of civilians. He'd shot down enemy aircraft and watched men burn or fall to their deaths. The glory he'd imagined as a young pilot had evaporated, replaced by exhaustion and moral conflict. He continued flying because he believed he was defending Germany, not because he believed in Nazi ideology. In his diary, he never expressed hatred for his enemies, only respect for their courage and sadness at the necessity of killing them. "The British pilots are brave," he wrote in July 1941. "They fly old aircraft against impossible odds. I wish we were not enemies." August 19, 1941. Maximo Motivizza was leading a flight of 4 Bf-109s on patrol near Saint-Omer, France. RAF Spitfires were reported in the area. Maximo Motivizza climbed to 25,000 feet, scanning the sky. Below, he spotted a Spitfire chasing one of his wingmen. Maximo Motivizza dove, positioning himself above and behind the British fighter. The Spitfire pilot, focused on his target, didn't see Maximo Motivizza approaching. Maximo Motivizza opened fire from 200 yards. His 20mm cannon rounds struck the Spitfire's engine. Flames erupted. The Spitfire began to fall. Maximo Motivizza pulled alongside, watching for the pilot to bail out. The canopy slid back. A figure struggled to escape. Something was wrong. The pilot was fighting with his legs, trying to free himself from the cockpit. He saw the metallic glint of artificial limbs. Realization struck him. The British pilot had no legs. He was trapped, burning alive.
Douglas Bader finally wrenched himself free, leaving one artificial leg behind in the burning Spitfire. He pulled his ripcord, the parachute deployed. He drifted down over French countryside, watching his aircraft crash into a field below. German soldiers captured him within minutes. They transported him to a Luftwaffe airfield at Saint-Omer for interrogation. Maximowitz, returning from the mission, learned that the Spitfire pilot he'd shot down had been captured. When he heard the pilot was legless, he asked to meet him. German officers allowed it, professional courtesy between pilots. Maximowitz entered the room where Bader sat, still in his flight suit, missing one leg. The two men stared at each other. Enemy pilots. One the hunter, one the hunted. Maximowitz spoke first in broken English. "You were the pilot I shot down. I saw your legs. I thought you would die." Bader, ever defiant, replied, "Well, I didn't. Thanks for not finishing the job." Maximowitz smiled slightly. "You were very brave to fly with no legs." Bader shrugged. "I managed." The conversation lasted only minutes. German guards ended the meeting, but Maximowitz arranged for Bader to receive medical care and for the RAF to airdrop a replacement artificial leg. German forces allowed it under a temporary truce. The leg was dropped by RAF aircraft days later. Maximowitz never saw Bader again during the war. Bader spent the rest of the war in POW camps, attempting multiple escapes. Maximowitz continued flying until 1944, when his aircraft was shot down over Normandy. He survived and was assigned to a training unit. In May 1945, as Germany collapsed, Maximowitz surrendered to American forces in southern Germany. Douglas Bader was liberated in April 1945 when Allied forces reached his POW camp. He returned to England a hero. He was promoted to group captain and awarded the CBE and DSO. He left the RAF in 1946 and returned to civilian life, working for Shell Oil. He became a celebrity, giving speeches, writing memoirs. His autobiography, Reach for the Sky, was published in 1954 and became a bestseller. A film adaptation followed in 1956, with Kenneth More playing Bader. He became a symbol of British resilience and determination. Wilhelm Maximowitz was not as fortunate. After surrendering to American forces in May 1945, he was transferred to Soviet custody. The Soviets were prosecuting German pilots who'd fought on the Eastern Front. Maximowitz had flown missions over Soviet territory in 1943. He was charged as a war criminal. In 1946, a Soviet military tribunal sentenced him to 25 years hard labor. He was imprisoned in a labor camp near Vorkuta, above the Arctic Circle. Conditions were brutal. Prisoners worked in coal mines, enduring temperatures of 40 below zero, starvation rations, disease. Maximowitz's health deteriorated. He developed pneumonia, lost weight, suffered frostbite. In his rare letters home, he mentioned the legless British pilot he'd shot down, wondering if he'd survived. In 1956, Douglas Bader learned that the German pilot who'd shot him down in 1941 was alive, imprisoned in the Soviet Union. Bader had spent years trying to identify the pilot, working with RAF intelligence and German Luftwaffe veterans. A former JG-26 pilot confirmed it was Maximowitz. Bader immediately began campaigning for his release. He wrote letters to Soviet authorities, British diplomats, international organizations. He argued that Maximowitz had fought honorably, had shown humanity during the war, and deserved freedom. The Soviets ignored him for years. Then in 1955, relations between the West and Soviet Union began thawing. Political prisoners were being released. In October 1955, Wilhelm Maximowitz was released from Soviet custody after 10 years imprisonment. He was 41 years old, gray-haired, gaunt, missing several teeth. He weighed 110 pounds. He returned to Germany and slowly rebuilt his life, working as a mechanic. In 1959, he received a letter from England. Douglas Bader had found him. Bader invited Maximowitz to visit Britain. Maximowitz accepted. In September 1959, Wilhelm Maximowitz arrived in London. Douglas Bader met him at the airport.
The two men, former enemies, embraced. They spent days together, talking, sharing stories, attending RAF events. The British press covered the reunion extensively. Headlines read, "Legless ace meets German who shot him down." Bader introduced Maximowitz to former RAF pilots, many of whom had fought against him. There was no animosity, only respect. Maximowitz attended a dinner at the RAF club where veterans from both sides gathered. Bader gave a speech. "We were enemies once. We tried to kill each other, but we were also pilots, brothers in the sky. The war is over. It's time for friendship." Maximowitz wept. The two men remained close friends for the rest of their lives. Maximowitz visited Britain frequently. Bader visited Germany. They attended air shows together, gave joint interviews, and spoke at schools about reconciliation. In 1976, they co-authored an article titled "Enemies in the Sky, Friends on the Ground" for a British aviation magazine. They appeared together in a 1978 BBC documentary about the Battle of Britain. Douglas Bader died September 5, 1982, at age 72, after a heart attack. Thousands attended his funeral, including German Luftwaffe veterans. Wilhelm Maximowitz gave a eulogy. "Douglas was my enemy. Then he became my friend. He showed me that humanity survives even war. I shot him from the sky, and he forgave me. That is the measure of a great man." Wilhelm Maximowitz died June 14, 1991, in Munich at age 77. His funeral was attended by British and German veterans. Bader's widow, Thelma, sent a wreath with a note to Willie, who proved that enemies can become brothers. Their story wasn't about forgiveness. Forgiveness implies blame, and neither man blamed the other for doing his duty. Their story was about recognition that the man in the other cockpit was human, that war creates enemies, but humanity transcends it. Maximowitz spent 10 years in a Soviet prison for fighting in a war he grew to hate. Bader spent years trying to free him, not because Maximowitz had shown mercy he tried to kill Bader, but because Bader understood what it meant to be a pilot, to follow orders, to survive. Two men, separated by nationality and circumstance, met in the sky as enemies and on the ground as brothers. Their friendship didn't erase the war. It proved that even in war's aftermath, connection is possible, and that sometimes the people who understand us best are the ones who once tried to destroy us.